Hello and welcome to ChessSteps demo lesson step 5. Today's lesson is about the strong square. And it's perhaps one of the most difficult topics we've talked about so far. Because whereas the other topics were tactical, mostly attacking techniques, this is part of what we call the positional play, the strategic planning within chess. And it requires a totally different kind of thinking and calculating and evaluating. But before we can start talking about strong squares, we actually need to check whether you have the necessary prior knowledge. And in this case, that would be knowing to spot a weak pawn, how to spot a weak pawn. I'm going to let you take a look in this position for a couple of seconds, and I want you to try and recall what a weak pawn is, and then determine which pawns are weak in the black position. A weak pawn is a pawn that's not and cannot be defended by other pawns. And by that definition, the following pawns marked red will be weak pawns. However, some pawns aren't as weak as others because, well, it's not hard to understand that the pawns on g7 and h7 could easily move forward and be weak no longer. The pawn on a7 is mildly weak. It could move forward, but that has a lot of implications for the b pawn, because the b pawn will become weak. So in a way, the a7 pawn is weak, but the weakest pawn of all, and that's the one we're going to focus on, is pawn on d6. Pawn on d6 is not protected by any other pawns, and it will never be in the future. And more so, the pawn is fixed, which means it can't move forward without being captured by the pawn on c4, the white pawn on c4. So we have identified what the weak pawn is, and well, it also makes it possible to spot a strong square, because in front of a weak pawn there's almost always a strong square, and a strong square is a square where I can put my pieces without them being harassed by my opponent's pawns, and usually or preferably protected by one of my own pawns. And it makes for a perfect outpost for my pieces. And in this specific position, we can see that d5 makes for a strong square. And if I were to place my knight there, as you can see, my knight will be dominating the position. It takes, it looks at both the queen side and the king side. It dominates the bishop, and it's completely safe. It can never be chased away. So that makes it a really good square for my knight. Another strong square in this position, however, is e4. And again, it has to do with the weakness of the d pawn, because the d pawn can't move forward, d5 can't be played, and an f pawn is missing, which means that e4 is a strong square for my piece as well, because it can't be attacked. And again, if I were to place my knight there, it will make up for a perfect spot. If it attacks the d pawn on d6, it could possibly move to g5 in the future, or go back to c3 and d5 again, and it's absolutely safe. So this is a clear example of what a strong square is and what a strong square can do for your position. Let's take a look at another position. This should do it. Yes, here we go. Well, we just looked at a position that already had a strong square for my pieces, but sometimes you can force a strong square on your opponent. In this position, if I'm white and I can see the pawns on c4 and d5 are looking at each other, now by taking on d5, I create a strong square. And the strong square obviously is c4, because it cannot be attacked by any other pawns, nor will it be attacked in the future. The c5 pawn can't move forward, so I can place my knight there, and it will make for a perfect outpost. So I can force strong squares upon my opponent. In the previous position, I did so by exchanging a pawn. I can also lure defenders away. In this position, there is a possible strong square. Do you recognize it? It's the square on g5. Because the h pawn is already advanced to h5. And if we were to trade off the pawn on e5, and black would take back, we've got an outpost on g5. And again, look how perfect this spot is for the knight. Again, it is attacking a bishop. It has influence on the opponent's side, and it doesn't need to be worried about being chased away. So perfect. Let's take a look at another position. In this position, I'm white, and again, there is a strong square already on the board for white. Do you recognize what it is? Well, I guess by now it's not that hard anymore. Indeed, it's the strong square on d5. Now, like I already said, it's important to occupy the strong squares with your pieces, but some pieces work better than others. And if we were to place our rook on d5, it would make no difference whatsoever in the position. The rook would just be standing there and it wouldn't do anything it doesn't do on d1. So a rook doesn't work really well as a piece on a strong square. Our knight, however, is a different thing. This is our new main line, and for the sake of our argument, I'm just going to move black's pieces around. And even though it takes a while, the plan is more than worthwhile. It took me 1, 2, 3 moves to get there. But now I've got a knight on d5 that controls both the queen side and the king side, that cannot be chased away, that dominates the bishop. So, as a general rule, try to occupy the strong squares with your pieces, and, well, usually it works best to do it with a knight or sometimes a bishop, but a rook in most instances doesn't work. However, general rules are there to be refuted. Not in this position, however. If I was black, I would see that my bishop is looking at its own pawn. But there's also a strong square for my black bishop. Do you see where it is? Yes, indeed, it's c5. So if I was black, I'll move my bishop there. Do you see another strong square? Well, black has several strong squares at its disposal right here. We already identified c5, but also b4, d4 make up for strong squares. And, well, as you can see, our bishop works well too on a strong square. But now we're going to look at an example where white was too eager. White successfully occupied the square on d5 with a knight, but it wasn't well prepared because black makes the move bishop e6, and now black is threatening to exchange the strong knight for its for its own bishop, which was a lot weaker than the knight was. And obviously white wants to prevent that from happening, because after the exchange, well, the strong square will be occupied by a pawn, which makes it basically useless, and it means it's no strong square, not a strong square anymore. So white wants to save its only piece that can occupy the strong square. However, after a5, he drops a pawn. So I told you the general rule. always occupy your strong square with pieces. But the second general rule is make sure your opponent can't exchange your piece on the strong square. Let's take a look at another position. In this position, I'm black, and my opponent has just played bishop f4, and it's obviously threatening to exchange my knight on e5, which is occupying a strong square. Now, moving it is impossible because I've got a weak pawn, and after I would move my knight, that pawn would drop. However, and I'm going to give you another general rule, I'm going to protect my piece on the strong square with another piece. Now, if white were to take, I've got another strong piece. I've got another piece on the strong square. So another general rule would be always protect your pieces on the strong squares with other pieces, because the only way for your opponent to dislodge a piece on a strong square is to exchange it. So you want to prevent that from happening. And one way to do that is to exchange the pieces that could possibly exchange with your pieces. For instance, in this case, we've got a strong square on d5, and white is planning to move its knight there. However, the black knight has his eye on d5 as well. It's the only possible defender of d5 that black has. If that piece would be exchanged, then it is possible for white to occupy d5 with its knight and never be chased away again. So white has a plan. White wants to exchange the knight. Can you still follow it with all the arrows? So black has only but one option. It needs to move its knight. And in this position, that can be done. For instance, by knight e8 or knight g8 works better actually, because then I'm controlling this square as well. And now white has no option but to exchange the bishop because it cannot move. It needs to take here. I take back. And even though white's position is still better, black still has some control over the square of d5. So this is a perfect example of how you can use a strong square and how your opponent can work against it. So a strong square is a square in front of a weak pawn. It's a square that cannot be harassed by your opponent's pawns. As a rule, it makes a perfect square for your pieces and you need to occupy it. However, second general rule would be protect it with your own pieces, if possible. And third general rule is your opponent is going to try and exchange it. So if you can, exchange the pieces that your opponent could use for that. Like we saw in this position, white was trying to exchange the black knight because it was the only defender of d5. Now, in your workbook, there are some exercises. However, it's a different type of exercise because these kind of positions work really well in gameplay. So I would advise you to practice these kind of positions, playing each other, make it 5-minute games, and learn how to use and protect a strong square. Well, I hope you enjoyed this lesson. This was all I had to say about it, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.